Welcome to Wisdom Wednesday. As always, I'm Rev Rich, and I'm so glad to be here with you today. I know it's been a few weeks. Again, I'm going through a few grateful things. Great things. I've talked about this on my Meditation Monday as well. I just submitted my paperwork for my bachelor's in metaphysics. And if anyone knows me, I get excited about information. I love to share it with you. And that's why I'm here. And that's why we do these videos. That while I'm not in a church doing, normal ministerial talks and everything on Sunday, that I can still bring this information to you right now. As well as we are setting a goal. I have been asked by a few people to begin a Sunday service online so that we will have the same, genuine spiritual, or as Unity calls it, celebration service that you can plug into with me talking or maybe a guest speaker. But either way, we have all these things happening. So again, I've been off a couple of weeks, and that's fine. We're going to start off as we did before. So again, always subscribe, like, hit that bell so you know when a video drops. And also, like I said, I always invite you to our Meditation Monday, our Tea Time Truth Talk on Tuesdays, and of course, Wisdom Wednesday. But another thing that I've already started was I returned to my podcast, which used to be called Worry to Wow. And the podcast in a nutshell was just literally that. For a lot of people, we hear the traumatic events that happen to them or the addictions that happen and they change their lives, XYZ, but we kind of forget the rest of us who didn't go through those things, but mentally we did because we allowed influences from outside. And how do we get out of our head and into our hearts? And begin to listen to intuition, begin to be tapped into that Christ center, that Buddha nature, and truly live the life that we are truly intended to be. So Worry to Wow is pretty much that. It's a podcast out there. You can do it by searching out the podcast with every encounter. And once you find that podcast, you'll see episodes not only about the podcast that's just a podcast, but you'll also see our Wisdom Wednesdays, Meditation Mondays, and of course our Tea Time Truth Talks also listed there, because I know there's some times where you can't get to YouTube and you're driving or you're walking and you just want something in your ear, so I wanted to make sure that you have that. So too much talk on the advertising part of things, so let's get to the nitty-gritty. And the last time we were together, we talked about the 5 principles of unity. And I love it because it's just something about the number 5, because even as a Reiki master teacher, we have the 5 precepts in Reiki that we follow on a daily basis, and it literally says just for today. And in Unity, pretty much they've taken the new thought principles that we teach and all the the lessons that Charles Fillmore, Emily Cady, all of that we teach, and brought it down to 5 specific principles that you can start with and begin to change your life. Another way to look at them is when we talk about the Holy Trinity. Father, Son, Holy Ghost, Father, Son, Holy Spirit, however you say it. That in Unity we look at it the same way, but it is the mind, idea, and expression. So mind reflects that connection to that one source that we call God. So the first principle is God is absolute good, everywhere present. And a lot of things that were taken from practical Christianity in the Bible, John 10:30 says, the Father and I are one. John 10:38, he says, even though you do not believe me, believe the works that you may know, and understand that the Father is in me and I in the Father. And John 14:7, if you know me, you will know my Father also. From now on, you do know him and have seen him. And again, we know it comes from the works we do. I remember a story from a minister, a Unity minister as well. It was when I started my journey. And she used to talk about how she hated when she got onto an airplane. You start that banter with somebody sitting next to you. And they're like, well, what do you do? And she's like, when I go to open my mouth to say I'm a minister, I already know the type of conversation that usually will come with that. And she started to use a phrase which helped her where she goes, I'm a minister. Oh, you're a minister. Yeah, how can you believe with all this bad stuff and this and that? And her question to the person is, well, tell me about your God. And that person will talk about hatred, will talk about all kinds of stuff. And she returns and says, well, my God, or God as I see it, is love. He doesn't love, he doesn't hate, he doesn't whatever. It is, he is, or the principle is just love. It is just beauty. It is just that. And many of us, especially me being Catholic, I went through Catholic school, I went through Jesuit high school for a year. I believed in something outside of myself, even as far as an old man sitting in the sky, watching over me, punishing me if I didn't do the right thing, trying to live a life. And it just something didn't feel right with me, and I had to bring myself back to start learning things. And it says, and I love where I quote the author here, it says, if I had one wish in the world, it would be that every adult re-examine his or her view of God at least once per decade. God may not change, but people do. And we outgrow our old concepts. The ideas about God that we held at 6 will not serve us at 16 and certainly not 60. And it is funny because that's pretty much almost where it was. As a child, I thought God was one thing. When I turned 15, 16, I started to search for what God was or who God was or whatever was out there past what I'd been told as a child. And now as 51, heading towards 60, I've evolved from that specific area as well. There's a lot of things that we have to look at. Again, she says here, I couldn't pretend to believe anymore, especially having learned in my required religious courses that the Bible was written by human beings and that a number of books were left out. I was dismayed to hear that most of what we considered Christian teachings were devised hundreds of years after Jesus by counsel of men and political agendas. I was astonished that the myth of the Virgin Mary, Mother, whose divine Son died and rose again, was an ancient expression of collective unconscious, long predating Christianity without literal truth of the Bible stories. Faith in me seemed to sham. Now, again, this is the author's opinion. For me, it was more of how the Bible was being used. I still didn't have my full understanding. I knew that through the classes in ministerial school, I've taken on a lot of what she has taken on and learned, but we had to understand that no matter what we believe, and again, this is in no way separating me from anything. As Ram Dass says, we're all walking each other home. What I love, and I will just share this as my opinion, is that in this learning, I've learned that I can sit down in any lesson now and interpret it metaphysically for myself and know that we're pretty much saying the same things. It's just the human concept of it going forward. One of the things that used to drive me crazy when it came to learning about God or whatever was the fact that anytime I questioned something, somebody would throw in my face, it is not for us to question. Well, as I've evolved through this training, I realized that everything we do should be questionable. It says first, she goes on to explain what would God for grown-ups be. She said, first, one that meets us where we are, welcomes our questioning, growing and changing and doubting. This reminds me a lot of if you haven't seen the book, read the book, or seen the movie Conversations with God. And in the movie, you'll see a scene where he's writing down, he's frustrated, everything's falling apart. And he wakes up to a voice asking him, do you really want the answers? Next thing you know, he's writing book after, he's writing and writing and writing, and he's getting answers from wherever. I looked at it as it was his intuitive nature, his Christ nature, his Buddha nature, whatever you want to call it, flowing through him. He was finally open enough to put himself aside. Second, she said, God for grown-ups has to be more than Santa Claus. The ground of all being surely is not making a list of who's naughty or nice or arranging. Third, she says, most people want to believe that God is involved in his life. And for me, we have always know that when we feel love, when we feel things, we know that it is more than that. It is a principle. It is the energy around us that flows in and through us. We just call it by different names. And when we understand that principle, we know that it moves in and through us and through everything. We know that that energy is through this candle, the candle holder, the table that's in front of me, that we know it's all one energy. So we know that it is not that this God we know is in or involved in our life, but that he is life, or that she is life, or it is life. I remember a teacher, and this may sound controversial to some people. I know it did when I was younger. Now it's like I can see what they're saying now. They say that God made man in his image, but in truth, we made God in ours. And it was that we wanted God to be what we felt it was, and what man felt it was, and what was comfortable for him. And in some cases, it's not the worst thing in the world. I had someone in my family who used to say that anytime he was praying to God, he saw them as a bobblehead of Morgan Freeman. And every time he would ask a question, if the bobblehead moved up and down, he knew it was a yes. If the bobblehead moved left and right, it was a no. And again, it was his image, his feeling that allowed him to feel that way. So when we talk about principle number one, we know that it affirms that God is all there is. God is omnipotent, omnipotent, omniscient, omnipresence, not all powerful, but is power, not all knowing, but is knowledge, and present everywhere. God is the stars, the rocks, the animals, the people. God is love, the creativity, the wisdom that human beings express. All that we are, have, is God, and we can never be separated from that universal point. The five principles challenge every aspect of theism: what God is, what human beings are, how the two relate, how prayer works, and how we are expected to live as human beings. As I said, it pretty much takes everything. Principle number one maintains that we are one with God, not separated, not being watched, but immersed in the divine. As the apostle told the Athenians, that we live and move and have our beings in God. Putting oneness into words is not easy, because we believe it has been the greatest challenge of writing this book. And again, this is a quote from the author. Our minds are schooled in duality: hot, cold, up, down, good and bad, us and them. Most people never have questioned theism, in which God and humans are separate entities. Even the term relationship with God connotes duality, the connection of two beings. And I will tell you that that's challenging for a lot of people. When I tell people I lost the titles of good or bad, I just know it is, and the perception is. And this is a whole other lesson, but you can look at it from any perspective. If you take a step back from any situation, you say it's bad, can you name someone who says it's good? And vice versa. And when you can do that, there really isn't a duality. It's just an actual sentencing, a situation that's happening now. I just wanted to read the Buddhist Sutra. Envisioned a net stretching in all directions. The Hopa spoke of Spider grandmother, who spun a great web connecting all things to the ancient Chinese. It was the Tao, or the flow of the universe, the hymn of creations from the Hindu. The Rig Veda speaks of the Absolute, called Brahman, and describes it as the ultimate, eternal, and beyond human descriptions. This is the ground of being, or the infinite reality. We hear the names God, Holy Spirit, the universe, the way, Father, Mother, Creator, Divine, One Mind, Source Energy, First Clause, and thanks to Star Wars, the Force. It has been named Allah, Buddha, Christ, Kali, Shiva, Krishna, and Kuan Yin. All concepts are the divine. And this is what I talked about when we talked about, excuse me, we talked about the various names of God. So when we finally get down to the nitty-gritty of it, we see God as principle. By principle is meant definite, exact, unchangeable rules of action. This is what Charles Fillmore, co-founder of Unity, has shared with us. It is a principle. It cannot be changed. 1 + 1 is 2. And we can add variables to it. We can take variables away, but in its purest form, it cannot be changed. We talk about the perspective of God to ourselves. So people like to ask about evil and stuff like that, but we have to realize that a lot of times it goes back to the good and bad. How do we perceive something? There's a lot of things going on in our world today, big focus on racial tensions and race consciousness and all of that. But there was a group of people that thought it was the greatest thing in the world to treat people this way. And to them, it was good. And there was people that bought into that mentality. And it was the same thing on the other side. Of course, colored people, we were treated a certain way and we thought it was bad. But we had to realize that in the end, it was just a situation that had to be taken into consideration. Now we know that in reality, when we look at it, it's something that we are working on and improving, and is still happening today. But in the end, we are still all one. It's sad that I remember making a joke one time learning, and I was going through ministerial school. And I said, well, imagine if we only saw our light bodies. If we were just all a bunch of light people walking around, there would be nothing to judge. And this person said to me, he goes, Rich, as much as I enjoy what you just said, you got to think about it. In our own nature, people will always find something. Maybe your light's not bright enough. Maybe you're not tall enough. Maybe you're too short. Maybe you're too wide. Maybe you're too skinny. They will, even if we don't have colors of skin, we don't have genders, we don't have anything, there will be something that we will find. And it's sad to see that. But when we truly understand that everything we do is sourced from this love, this joy, this peace, and we bring that into ourselves as in oneness, then and only then can we understand what God truly is and how it works through our life, which brings me to principle number 2, which is human beings have a spark of divinity within them and the Christ spirit within. This is the very essence is of God, and therefore we are also inherently good. Now, I remember these quotes from Wayne Dyer, and it is like Jesus answered them, is it not written in your law that I have said, you are gods? John 10:34. And very truly I tell you that the ones who believe in me will also do the works that I do, and in fact do greater works than these. And as you go and preach these messages, the kingdom of heaven is near. So one of the things he wanted us to understand is that we are a part of this. I just said that we know that this God principle is everything that works in, through, and all of us. And trust me when I say that it was a challenge for me, because leaving the Catholic Church, looking at the Bible as a weapon that most people were using to use against people, even at a young age, I never understood why we were separating ourselves depending on, people's sex or whatever, our color of our skin. And I never understood that. People called me naive. But when I heard how the Bible was being justified for that, I used to hate it. But it took me to understand these principles to bring me back. It says, with principle number 1, we broadened our understanding with God to the field of love and intelligence that is in the foundation of the universe. Every culture, religion has a creation story and explanation of how the earth and its inhabitants came to be. Some cite creation ex nihilo, meaning creation from nothing. Some believes humans were literally molded from dust and ashes and will return to earth after death. Some people have found ourselves as stardust and atoms of bodies remaining of the supernovas and exploded and cast our elements into the gateway. But no matter what you believe, we were the first idea in God mind. And if God is all there is and everything is God, how could we be anything but divine? And I always like to quote the creation story, because we talk about, there's actually 2 creation stories, but in both of them, he says, I looked at my creation and it was good. So why would we be anything but that? Each of us is distinct as a wave, yet made up precisely the energy and attributes of Mother Ocean itself. We are not the whole ocean, but we are the same composition, nothing more or less part of the divine flow. We can never be separated from God, and we only have to begin to tap into the power of the human spirit. It is the crux of principle 2 that we are expressions of the divine in human form and that our essence is God. We have known this for a while, that no matter what it is, when we talk about ourselves, we talk about our energy, we talk about things of this nature, that we are good, yet we spend more time putting ourselves down. I've had this talk with other people where I said, well, we talk about the 10 Commandments and it says, thou shalt not take the Lord your God's name in vain. But you got to realize that when we come to the understanding that God is principle, God is everything and anything around us. It is in the inanimate and the animate. And we say that I am, and we can finish it with the word stupid, dumb, ugly, whatever. We're doing exactly what the commandments tell us not to do, which is not to take God's name in vain. Because we're taking ourselves and putting it in vain. Another quote from the author is, with practical and political pressures intruding from all sides, the church became sharply divided about who Jesus was and what his life meant. His teaching that you are the light of the world competed with the ideas that Jesus and only Jesus was divine. But Christian mystics throughout the ages have continued to experience the intimate oneness with the divine that Jesus had, and that he called us to discover within ourselves. Let's go back to that quote where he said, you will do the works that I do, and even greater. Your faithful and perverse generation, how much longer must I be with you? How much longer must I put up with you? His final words of forgiveness, they do not know what they are doing, may have been a lament for all of us. Something that we're listening to it, but we're not actually hearing the message. No less an authority than comedian Bill Cosby told a Detroit audience, people are waiting around for Jesus to come when Jesus is already within you. Our job as humans is to revive that spiritual truth in the world and live from the Christ of our beings, the part of us that is God and divine. The point of spiritual growth then is to know myself as spirit and express it into my life. If anyone has watched or read the book from Dan Brown, it wasn't Inferno, it was the one after, The Lost Symbol. It was actually turned into a TV show on Peacock, if you happen to have that channel. And in that channel, if you watch the show, and I read the book, the last thing, and again, this is a spoiler alert, so if you haven't watched it and want to watch it, I would kind of fast forward this part of the video. But when he finally finds a destination and he finds a spot where this cryptic message that this guy was willing to kill for and willing to go through and find, thinking that it was something mystical, it was literally the words, know thyself. That is the part of spiritual growth, is from living from the Christ within, making decisions from the higher self, loving with the unconditional, inexhaustible energy of the divine, contributing to the well-being of the planet. It is to express effortlessly who we truly are. So, one of the things the author puts here, and I love it, is picture the 4 essential parts of every human, like Russian nesting dolls. The smallest is the body, which is essentially a spacesuit that allows us to survive in the Earth environment. Then the ego, which is the healthy state, gives us the focus and confidence to function in the human world. The soul is an eternal, individualized creation that grows and learns and seeks ever closer union with God and spirit, present in everything and everywhere, is God, the one, the same for all of us, and always available as the essence of who we truly are. Pretty much any event that could make up the lyrics of a country song is an expression of ego. Anything that is outside of us. One of my podcast shows talks about shame, and one of the follow-up shows will talk about how shame doesn't always come from traumatic events, but can also come from what we hear outside of us, and we begin to act upon those things, and we believe it as almost its law. We talk about everyone being inherently good, but we also look at the people who have done things, atrocious things. And we say, well, how could everybody be good when those things happen? It goes back to perspective. What do we truly believe in? What is in our subconscious mind? Which will take us to principle 3, which I'll talk about next Wednesday, which is our thoughts create things. Because if our subconscious mind, our heart, is programmed with hatred, if our heart is programmed with things, you can pour water through a sift, but if that sift is dirty, you will see the change in color, no matter how pure that water is. So we have to remember that the job we have to do, the action we have to do. Remember, principle number 5 is it's not enough to know the truth, but to live the truth we know. Once you understand that, so we've talked about God being principle, moving in and through us. He is not powerful. He is power. It is not. God is not love. Excuse me. God does not love. God is love. This principle is always, His love and knowledge is through everything, all of us. And when we understand that we are inherently good and we act from that place, then we can see how it works. So again, this is the mind part of the trilogy. Our next part is idea. How do we go from divine mind? How do we go from this all knowledge, bringing that into our Christ center, acting from that point? How do we move that from divine mind into an idea? And remember that everything, the chair I'm sitting in, the backdrop behind me, the candle in front of me, everything began with an idea and then was expressed out into the world. So let us take it into meditation. I haven't done a meditation with you in response to lessons in a while, so let's just go ahead and do that and just breathe into it. Because I know for some of us this may have been challenging. For some of us this may have been just, I knew it. Other people, maybe I'm still confused, and that's okay. Always feel free to ask questions. Always feel free to move forward. And again, I celebrate all paths to God. As Ram Dass says, we are here to walk each other home. So let's just take a deep breath and center into this moment that we know is God, this energy field of love as I exude love out to you, and I am open to receive from everyone and around me. And we enter into the stillness and align myself with the one mind, one presence that permeates of all creations. We feel ourselves as a part of this creation, connected to all of nature. We are the light and darkness. We are the ocean and the land. We are the rocks and the trees. We are the fish and the birds. We are the beasts of the earth, and I am one with every human being on the planet. And as I am one, we are one. And in this oneness, we sense the order of all things. We feel divine loves that moves me in my and in my molecules of the cosmos. We know that divine intelligence that is the foundation of all that is or ever will be, that we are one with all. And now we turn within as we retreat from the outer awareness and enter into our soul, the divinity in me. It is here that we know our connection to spirit. Deep within, we find the peace that passes understanding. Deep within, we find the knowledge of all things and the awareness of the absolute good. Deep within, we touch the gifts that are God. It is here that we receive wisdom and guidance, that we know truth. We understand that we are strengthened and comforted. And this is the divine essence that we all are. The core of us is God, and from God within us, we can do anything. Take a deep breath and just feel that now. Let it permeate through your mind, through your subconscious, through your heart. We know that God is principle. God is good, absolute good. And because we are the greatest expression of God in this life, or God in action, that we are good. How does that make you feel? Take another deep breath in. Allow it to permeate through our bodies as gratitude, knowing, and we say thank you, knowing that we now know that we are one with all creation. We are one with all of love, all of knowledge. And we know that by just releasing the world outside and tapping into that divinity of ourselves, that we are one with Source. We say thank you in gratitude. We share that gratitude out to the world. And we say it is and so it is, and we let it be. And we affirm this meditation with an amen and ashe. And I will see everyone next week in Wisdom Wednesday as we talk about principles 3 and 4. And principle 3 is human beings create the experience by the activity of their thinking. Everything in the mind, in the manifest realm, has begun in a thought. So I want you to kind of think about that as you go back and say, what did Rev Rich say about God? What does the literature say about God? What did the literature say about myself? Because this thought pattern is what's going to take you into that next lesson. As always, I love you if no one else has told you. See you on the next episode. I also bid you namaste as the big, beautiful divinity in me sees the big and beautiful divinity in you. Again, check out any of our other shows, as well as the podcast that you can find on any podcast streaming app or iTunes, Spotify. We're on all of them, even iHeartRadio. So with that, I'll see you on the next episode.